Have you ever imagined a war breaking out not in the Middle East or the Pacific, but right on America's southern border? A war not fought against a foreign army, but against the world's most dangerous cartel. A force so bold, so heavily armed, that they dared to move across the desert like an armored division. On the morning of September 5th, 2025, that nightmare became reality. In the barren plains of northern Mexico, 2,705 U.S. troops stood silently in the shadows, watching as a convoy of cartel gunmen drove straight toward what they believed was an undefended border. But this wasn't just another smuggling run. It wasn't a routine show of force. What the cartel didn't know was that their bold move toward American territory had triggered the most devastating coordinated strike in the history of the drug war. While their gunmen raced through the desert darkness, flashing weapons and displaying strength, miles behind them, their undefended drug empire was about to be erased from the map in 180 seconds of overwhelming American firepower. This isn't a police bust. It isn't a DEA raid. What unfolds in the pre-dawn hours is a symphony of destruction where every lab is marked, every supply route monitored, and every escape route cut off. The convoy racing toward the border was never the real target. It was the distraction that left their empire vulnerable to total annihilation. At 4:12 a.m. on September 5th, 2025, the desert air is still and heavy over northern Mexico. The stars hang low, clear, and sharp above the scrubland. Coyotes prowl the edges of the dirt roads, the only sound the crunch of gravel under paws. And then, out of the darkness, comes something else. Headlights flare on the horizon, dozens of them. A convoy of blacked-out SUVs and pickup trucks tears across the wasteland, engines roaring, suspensions straining over ruts and ridges. Inside, cartel gunmen clutch rifles, radios pressed against tattooed necks, orders and laughter mixing in the static. These men are no ordinary smugglers. They're kitted out in tactical vests, faces hidden behind balaclavas, weapons ranging from AK-47s to belt-fed machine guns resting across their laps. Some vehicles even bristle with makeshift armor plates, welded together in crude workshops, narco-tech designed to turn civilian trucks into mobile bunkers. Tonight, this convoy isn't hauling cocaine or migrants. Tonight, they're making a point. Their destination lies just ahead, the U.S. border fence. A line of steel and floodlights cutting across the desert, manned by sensors and watched by cameras. On the American side, silence. Just beyond the horizon, the faint glow of El Paso. But at this hour, with the desert so quiet you can hear a lizard dart between rocks, the roar of approaching engines carries far. This isn't subtle. It isn't meant to be. It's a show of force. At a forward U.S. Border Patrol outpost, a thermal camera operator leans forward in his chair. On his screen, heat signatures bloom against the cold desert backdrop. At first a few dots, then dozens, clustered tight and moving fast. He radios it in. Within minutes, the alarm is passed up the chain. It doesn't take long for the scope of the threat to register. This isn't a group of migrants or a smuggling cell trying to sneak through. This is something much larger, louder, and bolder. And it's headed straight for U.S. territory. Phones ring at Fort Bliss, Texas. Inside a command post, officers of Task Force Sentinel are shaken awake. For weeks, their mission has been to provide reinforcement and deterrence along vulnerable stretches of the southern border. Now, in the dark hours before dawn, they're facing exactly the kind of incident they were deployed for. Unidentified convoy, heavy movement, potentially armed. The report is short, but the implications are enormous. For Washington, the stakes are simple. A foreign armed group cannot approach sovereign U.S. territory unchallenged. To allow it would set a precedent, one that could embolden cartels, undermine border security, and send a message of weakness not only to criminal organizations, but to rival states watching from afar. For Mexico City, the picture is more complicated. These men are criminals, yes, but they are also a symptom of Mexico's long struggle to assert control over its northern provinces. Every convoy like this is a reminder that cartel firepower can, at times, rival the local military. The Mexican government can denounce the act, but stopping it before it reaches the border is another matter entirely. And for the cartel, this is a calculated gamble. By running a high-profile convoy toward the United States, they aim to intimidate, to signal strength to rivals, and to test the resolve of American forces. The message is simple. We can show up wherever we want, even at your border, and there's nothing you can do about it. But as history shows, underestimating America's willingness to respond can be a deadly mistake. The unit on alert tonight is no ad hoc group of border guards. Task Force Sentinel is a combined force of 2,705 U.S. troops pulled from active Army, National Guard, and supporting elements. Based primarily out of Fort Bliss, they've been rotating in and out of the border mission for months, honing patrols, reconnaissance, and rapid response drills. Their equipment is far beyond what the cartel convoys are used to facing. Armored Humvees sit fueled and ready. Bradley fighting vehicles with 25mm cannons capable of shredding light armor wait in motor pools. Apache attack helicopters stand on their pads, their pilots trained in the deserts of Iraq and Afghanistan. Long-endurance drones circle high above, unseen and unheard, relaying live feeds of the desert floor. When the alert comes, it isn't chaos. It's procedure. Within 15 minutes, pilots are strapping in, rotor blades beginning to chop through the pre-dawn air. Humvees roll out of staging areas, headlights dark, moving to intercept routes. Commanders huddle over maps, calculating distances, analyzing likely points where the convoy might test the fence. For the soldiers of Task Force Sentinel, this is not an abstract threat. It's here, it's real, and it's coming fast. Back on the Mexican side, the cartel convoy surges forward. Through night vision goggles, drivers navigate rutted tracks and arroyos. Radios squawk with bravado. Some laugh. Others boast about the Americans, convinced they'll hesitate, that Washington won't risk an international incident by firing on men who haven't technically crossed the fence. And in truth, they may be right, at least at first. The cartel knows how to weaponize ambiguity. By stopping just short of the line, by waving rifles but not firing them, by filling the desert with noise and movement but not crossing over, they can create confusion. They can stage footage, broadcast propaganda, and tell their communities and their rivals that they stared down the U.S. Army and walked away untouched. It's a tactic built on perception, on narratives, on the assumption that America will always choose caution over confrontation. But assumptions are dangerous things. As the convoy nears the final stretch of scrubland before the fence, a new sound cuts through the night. Deep, rhythmic, heavy. The thrum of helicopter rotors. From the north, two AH-64 Apaches sweep into the area, their silhouettes barely visible against the stars. Their sensors, however, are not. Inside the cockpits, pilots lock thermal imagers onto the convoy. Bright white signatures pop against the desert floor. Trucks, rifles, men. Every movement is tracked, recorded, logged. Down below, cartel drivers glance upward nervously. They know what those helicopters carry. Hellfire missiles, Hydra rockets, and 30mm chain guns that can chew through armored vehicles like paper. They've seen footage from battlefields half a world away. And now that firepower hovers above them, steady, patient, waiting. Behind the Apaches, U.S. ground forces maneuver into blocking positions, setting up along likely approach routes. Sensors in the fence confirm the movement. Overhead, a drone beams live video back to Fort Bliss, where commanders watch the standoff unfold in real time. The first time that night, the bravado inside the SUVS falters. Some gunmen shift uneasily in their seats. Others grip their rifles tighter. Because this is no longer a one-sided intimidation play. This is a confrontation with one of the world's most powerful militaries, the Red Line. As the distance to the fence closes, the choices narrow. If the cartel presses forward, even a few meters too far, they risk triggering a direct clash. If they turn back, they lose face, their show of force exposed as a bluff. Either way, the outcome will echo far beyond this desert. For Washington, backing down is not an option. Allowing an armed convoy to reach U.S. soil would undercut years of deterrence. For the cartel, Retreat carries its own costs. Power in their world depends on reputation, and reputation is built on fear. If rivals see them cowed by American helicopters, the balance shifts. The desert air grows tense, heavy with the weight of decisions. Engines idle, radios crackle, helicopters circle. Soldiers grip their weapons, night vision lenses glowing faint green in the dark. Everyone is waiting for the first move. The standoff begins. At 4:41 a.m., the convoy slows. Dust settles over the desert road. Some trucks stop. Armed men step out, forming loose perimeters, scanning the fence ahead. Others linger in their vehicles, doors open, rifles braced on dashboards. From above, the Apaches hover like shadows, their sensors painting every figure in ghostly infrared. On the U.S. side, Humvees and Bradleys idle in silence, waiting for the order that no one wants to give, but that everyone is prepared to execute. In this frozen moment, the entire standoff hangs by a thread. A single shot, a single miscalculated move. That's all it would take to turn a nighttime show of force into an international crisis. Through night vision goggles, U.S. soldiers watch shapes emerge from the SUVs. Armed men fan out into the brush, rifles slung across their shoulders, body armor strapped over plain clothes. Their movements are deliberate, rehearsed. This isn't chaos, it's theater. The cartel fighters want to be seen. They want their presence logged, reported, analyzed, because this entire display isn't about crossing the fence tonight, it's about proving they could. Cartel firepower versus American steel. The men stepping into the desert are carrying weapons that wouldn't look out of place on a battlefield. Standard AK-47s, yes, but also heavier ordnance, PKM machine guns, Barrett 50 caliber rifles, and even RPG-7 launchers strapped to the backs of pickups. Some vehicles sport improvised armor, steel plates welded onto doors, sandbags stuffed into cargo holds, firing ports cut into side panels. Cartel workshops have spent years turning civilian trucks into narco tanks, crude but intimidating. They can't stop a 25mm cannon round, but they're more than enough to shrug off small arms fire. The convoy's message is clear. We're not just criminals. We're an armed force. For years, cartels have blurred the line between organized crime and paramilitary power. Their arsenals include weapons smuggled from the United States, captured from Mexican security forces, or purchased through global black markets. Many of their fighters are veterans of conflicts in Central America, trained and hardened by years of war. Against police or lightly armed rivals, their dominance is overwhelming. But tonight, their opponents are neither. On the American side, the response is measured but unmistakable. From Fort Bliss and surrounding bases, convoys of Humvees roll out, engines throttled low, headlights dark. Bradley fighting vehicles take up positions near key crossing points, their turrets swiveling slowly, cannons leveled. Overhead, the Apaches circle like patient predators, their infrared sensors painting every heat signature below. Each soldier here has drilled this scenario. Steady speed, steady course, no unnecessary chatter, weapons loaded, but safety's on. They're trained not to escalate, but also not to yield. Every step, every maneuver is logged and transmitted back to command centers miles away, where commanders watch live drone feeds and listen to radio traffic in real time. The U.S. posture is deliberate, calm, professional, but there's no mistaking the firepower arrayed in the desert tonight. A single Apache helicopter carries a 30mm chain gun capable of spitting 625 rounds per minute, enough to shred a convoy in seconds. Each also carries up to 16 Hellfire missiles, precision-guided and battle-tested from Iraq to Afghanistan. The Bradleys bring another layer of lethality, with armor thick enough to shrug off RPGs and a main gun built to tear through narco armor like paper. Behind the front line, logistics hum in motion. Medics stand ready, supply trucks idle. Communications units relay satellite feeds to the Pentagon. The United States hasn't just deployed troops to the border, it has deployed a complete warfighting machine. Psychological warfare. The contrast in approach could not be sharper. The cartel's playbook is speed, noise, and aggression. By racing toward the border in a large convoy, By dismounting in force, by brandishing weapons under the floodlights, they aim to overwhelm psychologically. The objective isn't to win a firefight, it's to show audacity, to prove that no government, not even Washington, can dictate their movements. The US playbook, by contrast, is patience, freedom of navigation operations at sea, calm patrols in contested waters, deliberate silent deployments in deserts like this one. The message is subtle but unmistakable. We will not be provoked, but we will not be moved. Through the Apache's night vision sensors, the contrast is obvious. On the Mexican side, fighters pace, wave rifles, gesture dramatically. On the US side, soldiers remain almost motionless. Engines idle, weapons rest, radios stay disciplined. The very lack of reaction is itself a reaction, a refusal to play the cartel's game. For the men inside the SUVS, the silence is unnerving. They expected a scramble, panic, maybe even retreat. Instead, they see armored silhouettes sitting steady, helicopters circling calmly overhead, and no hint of fear. Cartel bravado is built on the idea that opponents will blink first, police will hesitate, rivals will scatter, civilians will flee. But here across the fence, nothing blinks, nothing flinches. In the cockpits of the Apaches, pilots keep their fingers near triggers, but the order hasn't come. Their screens glow with live feeds, every gunman tagged, every vehicle marked. They wait, they watch. Down below, American soldiers grip rifles, eyes behind green-tinted scopes. Some silently mouth prayers, others steady their breathing. But outwardly, the formation doesn't move. To the cartel, this calm is more intimidating than gunfire, because it signals something they rarely face: control. The big mistake. The convoy's leaders had assumed Washington wouldn't act decisively, that politics would tie the hands of soldiers, that lawyers and bureaucrats would weigh every move until the moment passed. But those assumptions were built on fighting police, not armies, on intimidating towns, not sovereign nations. The reality is harsher. By rolling toward the border in force, by stepping out armed within range of US firepower, the cartel has shifted the encounter from a law enforcement issue to a military one. And when the US military is engaged, the threshold for action is very different. The cartel hasn't crossed the fence, but in strategic terms, they've already crossed a line. Radio chatter and growing tension. On cartel radios, the tone shifts. The laughter fades, voices harden. Some call for pushing forward, testing how close they can get. Others urge caution, pointing to the helicopters circling above. "Those aren't Border Patrol choppers," one voice crackles through the static. "Those are military." On US channels, the communications remain clipped, precise. Convoy halted, dismounts observed, weapons visible. Updates are relayed in monotone voices, each one time-stamped, logged, and sent up the chain of command. In Washington, Pentagon officials watch drone feeds, their silence mirroring the calm on the ground. For every man in the desert tonight, the tension is visceral. One wrong move could tip the balance. One trigger pull could ignite a clash neither side claims to want. Minutes stretch into half an hour. Engines idle. Dust drifts. The desert feels suspended, frozen between peace and violence. This is where the years of US training matter. Soldiers here have drilled scenarios like this again and again. Rules of engagement briefings, escalation protocols, rehearsals for restraint. They know that not firing is sometimes as important as firing. The cartel fighters, by contrast, are improvising. Their experience is in ambushes, raids, firefights with rivals. They know intimidation. They know brutality. But they don't know professional standoffs. They're waiting for a reaction that doesn't come, and the silence gnaws at them. The balance tips. At 5:15 a.m., the eastern horizon begins to lighten. A thin line of orange creeps over the mountains. The Apaches adjust positions, circling wider arcs as dawn threatens to expose their silhouettes. The convoy of SUVs remains frozen, some fighters pacing nervously, others back in their vehicles with engines still running. The longer they sit, the weaker the message becomes. What started as a show of force is beginning to look like hesitation. Every minute under American observation chips away at the narrative they hope to create. Inside one SUV, a cartel lieutenant argues over the radio. "We came to show strength, not to die here," he insists. His voice carries an edge of frustration. Others disagree, urging him to push forward just a little further, to press the Americans until they react. But the decision is no longer in their hands. The stage they built has turned against them. From the U.S. side, the orders remain the same. Do not escalate, but do not yield. Helicopters continue to track. Bradleys continue to aim. Soldiers continue to watch. The message is unwavering. We are here, we are ready, and we will not move. For the cartel, the options dwindle. They cannot stay much longer. Sunrise will expose them fully. The helicopters will have clearer visuals. The Americans will have every advantage. What was supposed to be intimidation has become vulnerability. The retreat. At 5:28 a.m., engines rev, dust rises. One by one, the SUVs begin to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, pulling back into the desert scrub, headlights flashing on. Fighters climb back inside, rifles still in hand, eyes darting to the sky as the Apaches maintain their orbit. No shots fired, no casualties, no explosions, just a retreat masked as regrouping. But on the U.S. side, soldiers don't move, they don't cheer, they don't relax, because they know this isn't over. Tonight was only a probe, a test, a message, and the cartel will be back, perhaps bolder, perhaps bloodier. As the last SUV disappears into the desert haze, one truth becomes inescapable. The cartel made a big mistake. They tried to intimidate a superpower, and instead, they exposed their own limits. The question now isn't whether there will be another confrontation, it's when. Competing narratives. By the time the desert sun climbs above the horizon, the SUVs are gone. The dust has settled. The roar of engines has faded into silence. No shots fired, no bodies on the ground, no burning wrecks, just the echo of a tense standoff that ended without combat. On the surface, it was nothing more than a nighttime encounter that fizzled before dawn. But for everyone watching, from the Pentagon to Mexico City, from cartel safe houses to international observers, the implications are far larger. What happened in those dark hours is already being reshaped into competing stories, each one designed to serve a purpose. In Washington, the tone is sharp. A Pentagon spokesperson confirms that 2,705 U.S. troops of Task Force Sentinel were placed on high alert during the night, that American forces maintained control of the situation, and that no cartel fighters breached U.S. soil. The language is deliberate. It emphasizes sovereignty. It emphasizes readiness. And most importantly, it denies the cartel any claim of victory. Any armed threat to U.S. territory, the statement reads, will be met with decisive action. That phrase, decisive action, is no accident. It signals to the cartel, to Mexico, and to the wider world that America will not allow its borders to be tested without consequence. Inside cartel strongholds, the narrative is very different. Videos begin circulating on encrypted messaging apps and local social media. Grainy footage from cell phone cameras shows masked men standing near the desert fence, rifles in hand. Another clip shows trucks lined up in formation, headlights glowing against the dark. The captions are boastful. We faced the Americans. We stood on their border. We did not run. It's a story designed for their recruits, their rivals, and their communities. For recruits, it's proof that joining the cartel means standing against the most powerful military in the world. For rivals, it's a warning. We have the numbers, the weapons, the courage to face even the U.S. Army. For local communities, it's a show of dominance, intended to instill fear and respect. The fact that the convoy ultimately turned back is never mentioned. The silence of the retreat is replaced with the noise of propaganda. The convoy incident didn't happen in isolation. It's part of a larger escalation. In recent years, Mexican cartels have transformed. They're no longer just smuggling groups. They've evolved into heavily armed organizations with advanced weapons, armored vehicles, and even drones capable of dropping explosives. Their reach extends into politics, business, and communities. In some regions, they act as de facto governments. The United States has responded with increased deployments, intelligence sharing, and surveillance. Task Force Sentinel is just one example of a broader strategy to prevent cartel violence from spilling across the border. But the stakes go beyond crime. Every convoy, every armed display challenges the idea of sovereignty itself. If criminal groups can operate like armies, if they can stage confrontations with U.S. forces, the boundary between crime and war blurs dangerously. And that raises a larger question. How long can the United States treat cartels as a law enforcement problem before they become a military one? The symbolism of 2,705. One detail looms large: the number of U.S. troops deployed, 2,705 soldiers. That figure isn't just operational, it's symbolic. It shows a level of commitment far beyond routine patrols. It signals that Washington is willing to dedicate full combat-capable forces to border security. And it serves as a warning. Any cartel convoy that tests this resolve will face not just Border Patrol agents, but trained, equipped, and combat-ready soldiers. For the cartels, this changes the calculation. Their weapons may intimidate police, but against a formation of thousands of U.S. troops, they cannot win. And yet the fact they tested it anyway shows both their audacity and their desperation. The risk of escalation. The most dangerous part of incidents like this isn't the standoff itself. It's how close they come to tipping over. All it would have taken was a nervous trigger finger, a misinterpreted movement, a rifle raised too high. In the heat of the moment, with adrenaline pumping and helicopters circling, the line between restraint and combat is razor thin. Had a firefight broken out, the consequences would have been enormous. Dozens of cartel fighters could have been killed. American troops could have taken casualties. The political fallout would have rattled both Washington and Mexico City. Calls for escalation would have surged, and the narrative of border security would have shifted overnight. That it didn't happen is a sign of control, but the danger remains, because next time, the circumstances may be different. The final question. By the time the last SUV vanished into the desert haze, the standoff was technically over, but its significance was just beginning. For the cartel, the propaganda will continue. For Washington, the message of deterrence will be reinforced. For Mexico City, the political dilemma will deepen. But for ordinary people on both sides of the border, the danger remains the same. Heavily armed groups willing to gamble with escalation, and a superpower determined not to yield. So here's the question. Are these encounters inevitable? The cost of defending borders in a world where criminal groups act like armies? Or are they warning signs of a conflict that could one day spiral far beyond intimidation and into open war? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you followed this deep dive into the desert standoff, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. And if you want to support this channel directly, join the membership. You'll get loyalty badges, priority responses, and help us keep bringing these stories to the surface. Because whether in the South China Sea or on the US-Mexico border, the rule is the same. It's not about who fires the first shot. It's about who's still standing when the other side finally blinks.